A unit conversion is what we do to convert a distance or length in one unit of measure to a different unit of measure. This is really helpful when we aren't familiar with the meaning or actuality of the original unit. Let's say, for instance, we want to convert something from the US imperial system to the metric system, which is pretty much what everybody else uses. To bridge the gap between metric and imperial, we use 1 inch is equal to 2.54 centimeters. When we use it in a calculation, we write it as a fraction, 1 inch over 2.54 centimeters, or we can flip it to 2.54 centimeters over 1 inch, depending on which unit of measure is required in the denominator. Let's say we want to know how many centimeters are in 12 inches. So we'll convert 12 inches into centimeters using this process. First, we put 12 inches into a fractional format by just writing it over 1 for our denominator. Now we need to know our unit of reference for inches to centimeters. 2.54 centimeters is the same as 1 inch, so we write that in fractional form, and we can write it either way. In this instance, we need inches in the denominator, so that is the fraction that we choose. This is going to allow us to cancel inches in the numerator of the first fraction and inches in the denominator of the second fraction, which leaves a unit of measure of centimeters. Now we just perform the calculation of 12 times 2.54, and then gives us 30.48 centimeters over 1, which we know is just the whole number, 30.48 centimeters. And that's how many centimeters are in 12 inches. In performing conversion calculations, it's important to understand how different units of measure relate to one another and to have those unit of references available. So 5,280 feet is equal to 1 mile, 3 feet is 1 yard, 12 inches is 1 foot, and we've already discussed how we can bridge the gap to the metric system by understanding that 1 inch is 2.54 centimeters. Within the metric system, you may have to convert units of measure as well, and it's good to have those references handy. 1,000 millimeters is 1 meter, 100 centimeters is 1 meter, 10 decimeters is 1 meter, and 1,000 meters is 1 kilometer. So let's say we want to find out how many centimeters are in 2 kilometers. So we'll set up the problem just like we did before to convert the 2 kilometers to centimeters by putting 2 kilometers in a fraction form. We're putting 2 kilometers over 1. Then we're going to pull out our unit of reference so that we know how many meters in a kilometer and how many centimeters are in a meter. And we're going to multiply by 1,000 meters over 1 kilometer because that puts kilometers in the denominator of the second fraction because we had kilometers in the numerator of the first fraction. So then we're able to cancel both of those units of measure out. Now we need to convert from meters to centimeters. So we're going to multiply by 100 centimeters over 1 meter because it puts the meters in the denominator of the next fraction. That allows us to cancel out meters in both of the fractions as a unit of measure, and it leaves us with a unit of measure of centimeters. When we multiply everything together, 2 times 1,000 times 100 gives us 200,000 centimeters in 2 kilometers. We can do this with any unit of measure, even obscure units of measure that we don't use anymore. Take, for instance, biblical units of measure that we haven't used in hundreds or thousands of years. For instance, Noah's Ark was 300 cubits long. Now, a cubit is approximately 1.7 feet. So, how many meters long was Noah's Ark? First, we set up the problem, 300 cubits over 1, just like we've been doing. And then we're going to multiply by what we know, 1.7 feet is equal to 1 cubit. That allows us to cancel cubits in the first fraction and cubits in the denominator of the second fraction. Now we're going to move from feet to inches. So 12 inches is the same as 1 foot. We put the 1 foot in the denominator so we can cancel out the unit of measure feet. And now we're going to move into the metric system by converting inches into centimeters. So we'll multiply by 2.54 centimeters is the same as 1 inch, with 1 inch in the denominator, which allows us to cancel out inches as a unit of measure. Now we're going to go from centimeters over into meters by multiplying times 1 meter over 100 centimeters. So we can cancel out centimeters in both the numerator and the denominator. So now all we have to do is plug in the calculations. 300 times 1.7 times 12 times 2.54 divided by 100 is going to equal about 155.5 meters as the length of Noah's Ark. There are two reasons why all of this works. First is the identity property of 1. When we multiply or divide any item or any value by 1, its value remains the same. And in working with fractions, we know that when we take the same value and place it over itself, then the value of that fraction is 1. So when we take a value, let's say 36 inches, and we multiply it by that 12 over 12, which is essentially 1, we're not changing the value of the 36 inches at all. It remains 36 inches. It's the second property that allows us to actually change the units of measure, and that property is the substitution axiom. And it says that if you have any two values that are equal to one another, that you can substitute one in for the other and the value remains the same. So if I put 1 foot over 12 inches, the value of that fraction remains the same because 1 foot is 12 inches. So the value of that fraction is still 1. So what that means is when I put 36 inches over 1 and I multiply it by 1 foot over 12 inches, I'm still multiplying it by 1, and the length still remains 36 inches, but I am allowed to cancel out the previous unit measure and convert it over to feet, and performing all the math calculation, 36 divided by 12, I end up with 3 feet. This has been your host, Miss Tracy, on the EduGraphics channel. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you won't miss any videos. Thanks for learning with me.